So, what are the potential risks? You're saying that you don't have these, it's not as much as people think. What I guess there are risk and vulnerabilities associated with AI in military operations. And what is the meaning of that? And how can we mitigate it if there is any risk?
It depends upon what the application is. Most of the time when we think of an autonomous drone or we think of robots that are able to make their own decisions, we assume they can perceive their environment at the same level that humans can, and then make decisions, high functioning decisions, the same way a human can. And they can't.
Yeah.
There are too many what are referred to as abstraction layers. There are too many different contingencies built in place that need to be accounted for. Think of it this way. When our brains develop from the time that we're babies, we interact with the world through touch and through all of our senses. We grab things with our hands, we put things in our mouths, we look at things. And as we do that, our brains are creating a model, a statistical model of what to predict when we see and when we touch those things. As adults, we finally go into a room. We know what a particular material is supposed to feel like because we see wood. We know that wood's supposed to feel a certain way, the grains of the wood. We see paint on a wall. We know what that's supposed to smell like. These are all things that are built off of a model. But also the ability for us to process those has taken place over millions of years of evolution as a sentient being. That's just how we develop. Robots are learning the same way. And they have to learn at different speeds and different levels. Now they can go into synthetic environments. Like think of like a video game made in Unreal Engine, like Call of Duty or something like that. Those games and those gaming engines are literally where robots learn. They take the same software that the robot runs on and they put it into those interfaces, and then they have it run a whole bunch of different missions, and then they learn from those missions. They optimize their performance, and then they load that software onto a drone and they have it fly its mission. Once again, though, the abstraction layers are limited. They can only do so many. There's only so many contingencies that they can account for. And they have to build that into their matrix their determination matrix so that it can make better decisions. And so the more dynamic environments you throw at these robots, the poorer they're going to perform because they can only do so many things. Now, the more environments we put them in, the more they learn, the better they're going to be. That all depends upon the back end infrastructure and how well the companies develop that. Most companies that develop drones nowadays, they build them, they send them out to the end user, but they never get any feedback. They never get any of the data that's being collected. None of that goes, with exception of one major commercial company. Most companies don't do that, but there's a reason why the United States no longer uses that commercial company. They're actually banned for government use.
Because it's a regulatory thing, because you should not use this data.
Because it's a Chinese company called DJI, which owns 80% of the market. But in order to create an account or to set up or buy your drone, you have to put in all your personal information and then have your data stored on their repositories that all exist in China. And then it's also a government subsidized company. So if it's a government subsidized company and the government has direct access to the data, it's the same problem that the US government and other governments are having with TikTok. The data is being placed in a collective repository that can be accessed by a nation state. And that's a major privacy problem.
Right. I guess that most armies would not share their data, which is the way that they do combat, what they gather, and what's the information that they have with any kind of external companies. It doesn't matter if it's Chinese or not. And I guess that's why it needs to use maybe games, because information is not available for them really.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody wants their data to be secure, and they want to know where their data is being stored. That's the bottom line. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Everybody wants that peace of mind. But not being given the full information or being told on the back end who has access to it is a major problem.
Yeah, and after all, it gives you an advantage over your enemies. If you know something, if they know what you know, it's not an advantage anymore, I guess.
Also, another thing to keep in mind, though, is AI can only grow and enhance its capability with access to data. And it's not so much that the AI algorithm makes it impactful. It's the amount of data that someone is able to access in order to optimize their performance. So if you are willingly feeding somebody else all of that data, and they can build their models more efficiently off of that data, you are handing them an advantage.
Yeah.
And that is the crutch of every single one of these issues with AI. Same thing that's going on right now with ChatGPT and the large language models is where are they getting the data from, and do they have the rights to that data? And
Right.
artists, for example, are very upset right now because people are using their techniques and their likeness to create new things in these AI databases without their consent. And so there's a lot of lawsuits in place right now. And the drawback of that, though, is the more, let's say you go back and you remove all of those particular accesses and you're not allowed to use the database is no longer allowed to use those models. The model becomes less efficient and the AI is less powerful.
Yeah.
And so it eventually leads to something called model collapse. And that's where it goes into a feedback loop, and the model is creating data that itself has created. And then it's less efficient each time. And as time goes by, it degrades.
Yeah.
And
And I guess that what you're saying, that this is one of the challenges for someone who wants to develop an AI for military use. He has limited resources of real data, and therefore it cannot grow and succeed in that capacity as we imagine it could have.
Yeah, so it's the aspect of access to data. It's also an appropriate DevSecOps pipeline within the IT infrastructure that can support that data being moved appropriately, being stored in appropriate locations, and then the AI algorithms being able to pull from that information, and then individuals being able to annotate it as well. And that's the critical point. A lot of people don't realize that in order to have an AI model work well, you need someone to literally annotate that data. I'm not talking about a robot. I'm talking about a person. Let's say, for example, we were doing a computer vision facial recognition software off of the video you and I are using right now. I would want to be able to say, this is Jim, and then click on that face. Yep, every single image, and confirm that. Somebody physically needs to do that. And then eventually the model gets so good that it's just a confirmation process, and then it becomes statistically better than a human does. But in order to get there, you have to literally hire annotators to do that. Wow. And that's another part of the AI industry people don't realize, is there are literally people in buildings or at home just clicking images all day long.
Yeah. And I guess that what we're saying, first we talked about the data, and the second thing is that when we're thinking about decision making, you would think, okay, should I drop the bomb or not? But decisions could be just, should I go straight or to the side? Is it a tree, or is it just a dark area in front of me? Or it's not the decisions that we always think about when we think about AI or robotics in military.
Yeah, in that particular case, you would be there's been updates to the way that I know the United States government has considered it. There's a directive that's called 3000.09, which is the directive for autonomous weapon systems, and it was recently be updated as of January. Before, a human always had to be the final decision maker at the very, very last state to say yes or no, and that is no longer the case. If they can build up the reliability of how it performs at the end state, then the decision is not made at the final moment. The decision is made when you launch it. So it's a different timeline, a different perspective of how you see the problem.